Honestly, I don't know how I'm going to feel when I get home.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter as always at redrock_bball. Today we're going to be looking back at Sunday's games. We're going to be previewing Monday's action and Week 12 in the NBA as well. Michael Bolton.
Let's get to it.
A quick programming note, this will be the last Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast for 2018. There won't be a show tomorrow, but then back at it after that. Hope you guys, I'll take this time now to thank everyone for listening to this podcast, for downloading this podcast, for telling their friends about it, for rating and reviewing it. It's been a very successful 2018. The podcast has grown more than I could have hoped for, so thank you to everybody who's been listening, and I want it to continue to grow and continue to provide stuff which you guys find useful, informative, and hopefully entertaining as well. So thank you for everybody who has listened to this show throughout this year, and I'll be back obviously in a day's time after today's show to help you out, or not even help you out, to just provide information or analysis or thoughts on the NBA and in fantasy basketball. So thank you to everybody who has listened throughout 2018, and I hope you and your families all have a safe and happy new year. Now, in saying all that, it's time for us to move on and talk about the action from Sunday, and of course we start with
Monstrous line of the night.
the monstrous line of the night. It couldn't be anyone else except for Karl-Anthony Towns of the Minnesota Timberwolves. This is one of the biggest lines of the entire year. 34 points with 18 rebounds, 7 assists, 3 threes, 3 steals, 6 blocks. He was 12 of 24 from the field, 7 of 9 from the line. He narrowly missed out on being an above-average contributor in all 8 categories. Just that 7 of the 9 from the line was just marginally below. Actually, no. With the finalization of that last game, it actually did turn into a marginal positive. So he had one of those rare 8-cat lines. Towns had been slumping. I actually did a waiver wire show earlier today and talked about how he was, over the last 2 weeks, the 30th ranked player, and his efficiency had dropped, so it was a good buy low opportunity. 3 hours later, he goes out and does this. So hopefully someone was able to listen to that and execute that and buy low on Townsy. He is a very good passer, and we've seen that start to increase over the last month, almost 4 assists per game. He is going to be a top 5 guy in fantasy for many years to come, I believe. I think he'll finish this season from here on out as a top 5 guy this year. And when the blocks come up and when the assists come up, he can push into that top 2, top 3. This is obviously an expanded number in terms of the defensive stats, 9 combined steals and blocks. And that's not likely to happen all the time, but this is just an idea of the sort of stuff that he can do. So fantastic performance from Karl-Anthony Towns.
Waiver wire line of the night.
The waiver wire line of the night goes to DJ Augustin of the Orlando Magic. DJ played 38 minutes in this game. His numbers have been way up recently. 38 minutes in this one, 26 points with 4 triples, 2 rebounds, 8 assists, and 2 steals. He went to the line 10 times and hit all of them, and was a fantastic 6 of 11 from the field. He'd been really, really struggling, but over the last 2 weeks, he's a top 50 player. 31 minutes a night, 17 points, a steal. Now, the shooting is unsustainably high at 50% and 97% from the line, but he is a bloody good free throw shooter. So it's not that outrageous. It's more that the usage has spiked from 16 up to 20%. The minutes have gone from 28 up to 31 as well, and that's keeping him in a really good spot. And over the last 2 months, he's a top 115 player, which means he's a 12-team league guy. And he is available in many, many leagues, available in 61% of Yahoo leagues, and I think he probably deserves a spot on your 12-team roster. This is clearly best-case scenario, what we're seeing at the moment from Deej, but if he can be a maybe top 100, top 110 guy, there's some value in that as we start to push into the fantasy playoffs as well. So some strong performances from DJ Augustin, capped off here with a waiver wire line of the night. The deep leaguer of the night goes to Zaza Pachulia of the Detroit Pistons. The second time in a week that Zaza's had one of these weird games. Drummond was battling foul trouble, so we got 23 minutes out of Zaza. 8 points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists, and 2 steals, 2 blocks. I think it was last Sunday that Zaza also had 2 steals and 2 blocks. We had the tackle box, John Lua, completely out of the rotation. Zaza getting all of those backup center minutes, and that helped him here. He's nothing more than a very, 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 very deep league guy, but it is worth mentioning that he did put in that performance today and those steals and blocks. If for some reason you had him, it would have turned into a good performance, but not something that we need to really action or do too much with as we move forward. The great guys at Pure Tanica are sponsoring today's podcast. Again, Pure Tanica provides the fantastic product, the Cool Bliss shampoo and conditioner, and I love using it on my hair. And I'll guarantee it that you guys will love it too, because it's got that fresh menthol feeling. When you put it on your hair, you feel invigorated, wakes you up in the morning, helps relax you after a long day at work. The Cool Bliss shampoo and conditioner from Pure Tanica is a fantastic product. We use it at home all the time. Yeah, for that really, I love that minty smell. It's like as gross as this sounds, it's like putting toothpaste on your hair, and that fresh feeling you get in your mouth, where you get that on your head, helps to invigorate, helps reduce dry scalp, dandruff, and it can also help in thinning hair as well. So Pure Tanica, you can go to puretanica.com and use the promo code basketball for free shipping in the US, or you can buy it off amazon.com as well. That's Pure Tanica, and use that promo code basketball as well. Let's move on to the next award now.
Young Gun of the Night.
It goes to a guy that has racked up this award so many times this season, De'Aaron Fox of the Sacramento Kings. 34 minutes for Foxy, 26, 4 and 7 with 3 steals and a block on 63% shooting. His ability, him, TJ Warren and Derrick Rose have shown unbelievable turnarounds in their shooting in this season, stuff which you couldn't have predicted would have gone anywhere near that level. He is currently the 35th ranked player in fantasy. I'm a little bit worried about the nagging shoulder injury that he keeps getting knocked on. It keeps looking like he's going to miss time. That's a little bit of a concern, but averaging 18 and 7.5 with 1.7 steals on 47%. Now, he's still not a good free throw shooter, 72% there, worse than he was last season. So that gives me some pause that some regression from 3 and from 2 could be coming from Fox. But he is a completely different player than what he was last season, where he was one of the worst players in the NBA last year. His free throw rate has skyrocketed. We heard so much about him getting stronger and being more aggressive. And that one Summer League game he played, he just got to the rim wherever he wanted. And you go, it's Summer League, but it did give me some hope of a breakout, to nowhere near this sort of level, of course. But Fox is putting up huge numbers and looks entrenched as a future top 30, top 25 sort of a guy, maybe even getting to the top 20. But that's going to depend on that shooting and how much he can stick that, and if he can get those free throws up to 80%. But another fantastic performance from De'Aaron Fox to get another young gun of the night.
I tell a man's not hot.
The dud of the night goes to Zach LaVine of the Chicago Bulls. Just atrocious, this game from LaVine. 33 minutes for 13 points, 3 rebounds and 2 assists, but a 0-0 and a horrendous 3 of 17 from the field, including 7 of 7 from the line, which is obviously good. We talked about LaVine's efficiency not being able to sustain. He pretty much gave back all the gains that he's made almost in this one game here. He's down to 45% on the season, which is actually lower than his last season in Minnesota. For a guy who started that hot this season, there was going to be some regression, and down to 34% from 3. It's mean that over the last month, it's only 10 games for LaVine because of his ankle. He is outside the top 50, and he was never going to, in my opinion, maintain that top 50 number. And he was like a top 25 guy. He was never going to maintain that. The efficiency's got, it's not at a great level at the moment, so there is a chance that it can sustain at that 45%. Today was just a brutal performance, but the free throw attempts, the free throw percentage are obviously really promising for LaVine, and that does help his value. But when you get a game like this with his lack of defensive skills and defensive stats, it does cause somewhat of an issue for the Bulls and for your fantasy team as well, as he just doesn't, he's not able to accumulate those numbers. And I feel like some of those assist numbers he was getting earlier in the season, with Chris Dunn now around, I'm just not sure he's going to get the same level of opportunities to do that he had to begin this season, and that was a big part of him being a really excellent fantasy guy to begin the year. The best net ratings of the day, the GOATs, the best net rating went to, of course, the Chief.
Sometimes it may be good, sometimes it may be shit.
Al-Farouq Aminu was a plus 119.3 in the Blazers' demolition of the Philadelphia 76ers, while on the flip side, unsurprisingly, the worst net rating of the day went to someone from Philadelphia. That was Landry Shamet of the Sixers. His net rating of negative 69.6 was the worst on the day. So, Not a great performance for Philadelphia. We'll get into that in a second. The Chief putting up some strong numbers as well. He probably is a 12-team league guy at the moment, Aminu, but we'll talk about that in 1 second. Let's talk injury news. Of course, the big news over the weekend, John Wall out for the season with that heel injury. Thomas Satoransky, I've said this a few times, he is a must-add player in my opinion. In the 2 months that Wall missed last season where Satoransky started at point guard, he was the 54th ranked player over that time frame. He's not going to be a high scoring guy, but he gets assists, he rebounds okay, he hits threes, he gets steals, and it's the efficiency that really brings the numbers for Satoransky. You can't really look into the starts that he had this season because the majority of them were at small forward where he was playing alongside Wall and not in control, not handling the ball, and that means his numbers look lower. But now he is going to be playing an absolute shit ton of minutes at point guard, and to me, he is a must-add player with this Wall injury. It does increase the value of Bradley Beal, maybe to a top 15 player. Trevor Ariza gets a bump as well. You could look at even, people look at Thomas Bryant. Is he going to get a huge bump here? I think usage-wise he can get a bump, but his big minutes games have come because Markieff Morris has been out, and I don't really think it's got much to do with Wall's absence. We'll see, but those positions obviously don't really intertwine at all, but usage could go a little bit more towards Bryant in this situation. Mo Harkless missed today's game with a knee injury. We know he's had these knee problems for so long. It looked like he was over them. He played 31 minutes last game and then didn't play today. So it's a situation to monitor. He was starting to get some flashbacks, some defensive numbers, and we'll go, oh, that's getting close to 12-team-like numbers, but the knee injury sets him back and leaves him more as a deeper league guy. Paddy McCaw has officially signed with the Cleveland Cavaliers. The Warriors have declined to match that restricted free agency offer. Now, I liked McCaw as a player. He struggled last season. He's a guy who could handle the ball. He can hit threes, get assists, and get steals. Sort of like a Marcus Smart type of player in terms of statistical profile, a worse rebounder and worse defender and worse steal accumulator than Smart, of course. And that's all well and good. Heading to Cleveland, though, as bad as this sounds, or as dumb as this sounds for one of the worst teams in the NBA, that rotation's pretty solid with guys. You got Colin Sexton, you've got Jordan Clarkson, Matty Dellavedova, Rocket Rodney Hood, Alec Burks, Chetty Osman. What sort of role is McCaw going to have on this team? He's not stepping in and playing 30 minutes a night. Now, guys get injured. Burks is injury prone. Hood is injury prone. Dellavedova's had numerous ankle injuries over the course of his career, especially the last couple of seasons. So opportunities could arise for McCaw, but he's not stepping into a 30-minute-a-night role here. He might struggle to get to 20 minutes a night when everybody is healthy, and that's going to mean that there's not a huge amount of value there. He's definitely not a 12-team ad. 14-team, probably not. Maybe 16, maybe. But it's not like he moves into a team with a glaring hole. Now, if he went to Chicago, say, where they don't have a backup 2 or a backup 3, he could easily slide in and play 26 minutes a night. In Cleveland, he comes in as a guy who hasn't played all year, no training camp, no idea of his teammates or the scheme or anything like that. It's going to take him a while to get up to speed. And then he comes in as the 6th wing. I'm including the point guards as wings, which I really shouldn't, but into that zone. And then when Kevin Love and Tristan Thompson return, Chetty Osman doesn't play at the 4 anymore. He comes back to the 3. I just don't see those minutes from McCaw. So it is just a deeper league. Now, that could easily change, but at this point, it is just a deeper league scenario. And I didn't even mention David Nwaba, who the Cavs seem to really like, but can't get over his own injury problems. Devin Booker, another injury to talk about, dealt with a back injury on the weekend. He's questionable for Monday's game. It's just a contusion, but hopefully he doesn't miss any time. Then a couple of injuries, which I didn't list on this sheet. DJ Augustin and Zaza Pachulia both suffered ankle injuries, as did John Simmons of the Magic. And if Augustin and Simmons are both out, the Magic point guard situation goes from horrible to somehow worse than horrible. So that'll be very, very intriguing to see how Steve Clifford handles that situation, if indeed that is what happens. Let's move on now to break down the 6 games, that we had on Sunday across the NBA. We'll talk about this first one because that's always a great place to start. It was the Detroit Pistons and those Orlando Magic. The Magic get the victory in the end over the Pistons, 109-107. Blake Griffin had 15 with 5 assists. Not his best night, but he's still going along fairly strong, but not as hot as he was to begin the season. Drummond had those foul issues, and it was a pretty empty line, 14 and 15 with literally no other numbers. While the Duck, Luke Kennard, I really do think he can be a good fantasy player. We've seen flashes the last 2 games, 23 minutes here, 16 points, 6 rebounds, and 3 assists. I'm not getting excited. I'm adding him maybe in 18 or 16 team leagues. I don't have full trust in Dwayne Casey's trust in him, and that's what's all important about how Kennard plays. We still had the Shark, Bruce Brown.
Baby shark, do 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 do.
He was starting again at shooting guard, 10 points, not much else there. He's not really an impact guy, while Reggie Bullock, I believe, is a 3-point streamer. He can be a 12-team league guy, but he's not a must-roster guy by any stretch, while Reggie Jackson, not a good night, 11, 5, and 4, still a 12-team league player. On to the Magic. We talked Augustin already. Aaron Gordon bounced back with 22, 10, and 4. He had really been struggling prior to this game, but that's good to see him back, while Vucevic, 22, 11, and 4 with 2 blocks. Good to see him back in business. Terry Ross had 9 points. Johnny Isaac, I think we move on from Isaac, to be honest. 30, I really like him. It just doesn't feel like the consistency in playing time, in role, in shot attempts, in offensive production is going to be there. And even the defensive numbers have dropped this season. 4 points in 33 minutes for John Isaac. I still like him. I still think he's going to be good. I'm just not sure that's worth holding on at this point. Evan Fournier had 13 points in his 30 minutes. He could see a real boost in value if Augustin and Simmons' injuries are long-term, which I don't think they are, but there is a chance of that, of course. The next game was the Minnesota Timberwolves beating the Miami Heat on the road, 113-104. No Jeff Teague.
My name is Jeff.
No Derrick Rose, so Tyus Jones started 12, 4, and 5 with 5 steals. I really like Jones. I'd love to see him have an opportunity to be a starter somewhere. It's never going to happen in Minnesota. His ability to get assists and steals, he's like a point guard version of Kyle Anderson, not a high scorer, but contributes across the board, and we saw that again from him today. And if Teague and Rose are out long-term, or even a couple more games, then he would be a solid short-term add. Covington had 16 points with 4 rebounds and 2 blocks, a nice night there. Well, Dario Saric, 13 points, but played only 19 minutes, had a steal, a block, hit 2 threes, filled it up, but the Tom Thibodeau bullshit machine was back in full effect with Saric, so it is hard to feel any sort of trust in him. He's not a 12-team league guy, neither's Gibson. While Andy Wiggins, man, this is bad. 13, 2, and 4 on 31% shooting. He's really veering into points league only type of a player at this point. You still have him in 12-teamers. 10s, I'm not so sure you need to roster him in 10-team leagues. He has been painfully bad this season. For the Heat, there was no James Johnson, so we had a little bit of a shake-up in that front court. Derek Jones Jr. started and put up a good line, 16 and 9 with a steal and a block. But Johnson's dealing with a stomach illness. This isn't a long-term thing, and we saw when these guys were healthy that Jones could barely get into the rotation. He barely played, so he's not an ad based on this. Same with Kelly Olynyk, who had 13, 6, and 3, 2 steals and a block. We know Olynyk can do it in minutes, but he'd been pushed back to 20 minutes a game with Johnson's health returning to him. Joshie Richardson had 17, while Dwayne Wade a brilliant 21, 4, and 5. He's been much better this season, Wade, than last year. Let's talk Justice Winslow. 30 minutes for Winslow, 10 points. The encouraging thing here is 7 rebounds, 3 assists, and 4 steals, but we talked about at length how the shooting would not continue, and he shot 27% here and was brutally bad in the shooting department. Now, the other thing that correlates or seemingly correlates with Winslow is when he has a bad shooting night, he plays 3 or 4 fewer minutes, and that happened again in this one. The thing is, he's bailed out by the 4 steals there, but otherwise, if he just had 10, 7, and 3 on 27% shooting, that's barely a 12-team league line. I think I know that he is a 12-team guy you want to add, but those top 50, top 40 numbers he was putting up over his last 3 were completely unsustainable. Everyone who listens to this probably is aware of that as well, because he's never going to shoot 56% for the game, and he's going to be wildly inconsistent. Tyler Johnson, 27 minutes, 8 points. I don't believe in him as a 12-team league guy, and this backs up my claim there. While Whiteside had 8 and 13, and Adebayo went back to the 18 minutes. I don't think holding on to Bam is a solid move in 12-team formats. The next game we look at, the Chicago Bulls and the Toronto Raptors. Markkanen had 18 and 10 with 4 triples. Solid from him. While another good steals night from Justin Holiday. 11 points, but he played 40 minutes. 4 steals there for Holiday, one of the best 3-pointers and steals streamers in the NBA. He's not a streamer, he's a must-roster guy. 2 games in a row for the Block Panther, Wendell Carter Jr. of big minutes. 33 minutes here, 16 and 11. Amazing that he didn't even get one single foul. Maybe he's figuring it out. If anyone dropped him, go and add him. And you were in your rights to drop him because he just couldn't stay out of foul trouble and he was being dicked around by Boylan. That's reversed, so you go and add him. Chris Dunn had 14, 3, and 8 with 2 blocks, while Levine, we've already touched on how poor his performance was. Archer Jacquino, his value is in the tank, unsurprisingly. For the Raptors, still no Kyle Lowry, so Fred VanVleet had 10, 5, and 7 with 2 threes. This is not a long-term thing for Lowry, it's just maintaining him, getting it right. It's not a long-term issue, so don't panic sell. In fact, try and buy low on him if you can in your leagues. While VanVleet continues to put up numbers while Lowry is out and is worth that stream. Siakam had a poor game over the weekend, but bounced back here, 20 and 12 with 4 assists, while Ibaka couldn't get too much going, but added the 2 blocks, while Dan Green did what he loves to do, and that is get a Richie Beno.
2 for 2, 2, 2.
2 threes, 2 steals, and 2 blocks for Green. He's not for everybody. He doesn't fit every team. He's wildly inconsistent as well. He can be a 12-team league guy, but he's not a must-roster guy. While the fun guy, Kawhi Leonard,
I'm a fun guy.
27 and 9, no other numbers, and poor efficiency. So not Kawhi's best performance, no doubt about that. Let's go on to the next game here. We have, who is this next game? It is the Oklahoma City Thunder and the Dallas Mavericks. A good win for the Mavs, 105-103. Paul George missed a game over the weekend. He was back, 36 and 5 with 2 steals. While Westbrook, man, the shooting is atrocious. 9 points on 22 shots, 18% from the field. Now 9 rebounds, 8 assists and 6 steals. 8 assists and 6 steals is fantastic. But the shooting at this point, he is just he's brutalizing you in free throw percentage and in field goal percentage, and he continues to take just atrocious. Actually, that's not true. He doesn't take atrocious shots. Well, he does, but not all of them. He just can't hit even the good shots that he has, and that's a real problem for him and his value moving forward. With Terry Ferguson and Alex Abrines out, Dennis Schroeder played 33 minutes, had 19, 4, and 3 with a steal and a block. Now, that's 2 strong games in a row for Schroeder, but it's because of Ferguson, Abrines, and Paul George's absence last game that those big numbers are there. So if you can sell him for any sort of top 70 player, you should jump on that immediately. Jeremy Grant had 10 and 2. Not his best night, but he is a 12-team. While Steven Adams struggled a bit as well, 8 and 9 with 2 steals. And, of course, missed both his free throws. Abdul Nadir started for Ferguson. Only the 3 points for Nadir. He's not that good. On to the Mavericks. The biggest surprise here was DeAndre Jordan blocked 2 shots. He had 12 points and 17 rebounds as well. While Doncic, 25, 3, and 7. Another big game for Luka. Dennis Smith Jr., he's back from his wrist injury. 14, 4, and 1. Strong enough. The game before, pretty good. I think that he is a 12-team guy, and I would go and add him without too many hesitations. While the pencil Harrison Barnes contributed 2 steals. That's always a rarity. 16 and 6 in his 35 minutes. While JJ Barea continues to be an excellent source of assists. Another 10 dimes for him off the bench, while Maxi Kleber started for Wes Matthews. 3 and 7 for Maxi in 28 minutes. You would imagine when Wes comes back, he moves back to the bench, and then finding those minutes for Kleber is going to be tough. He was out of the rotation when Dirk returned, and they only found him back in when they had those injuries to Smith and Matthews. The next game we take a look at, it is the Philadelphia 76ers and the Blazers. Portland won 129-95, just an absolutely huge win. There's very little to take out of this game. The Sixers were without Embiid, so Amir Johnson started. He did nothing, and the biggest performance came from Timothy John McConnell, who had 14 points with 2 assists and 2 steals. As long as Fultz is out, which could be as long as the rest of the season, McConnell is an okay assists and steals guy, a poor man's Marcus Smart, more 14 or 16 team than 12, but there's some stream value there. But everyone else just saw their minutes drastically reduced. When you get 10 minutes for Demetrius Jackson, you know that this game was out of hand pretty early. For the Blazers, CJ McCollum had been struggling. He had 35 points on 72% shooting, so that's a good return to value, but not much else in the other categories. 3 rebounds and 3 assists. I don't see this as a signal that he's moving back into the top 30. The Chief, Al-Farouq Aminu, had 16 and 8 in his 22 minutes, shot the ball well. He's so up and down, we know that, but he's probably a 12-team league guy, while everyone else saw the minutes reduced. Mo Harkless was out, so Evan Turner started 8 and 7 for Turner in his 23 minutes, but it's not the game to try and draw sweeping conclusions from, given how early this game was actually over and out of hand. The last game of the night was the Kings and the Lakers. The Lakers win 121-114. Bogdan Bogdanovic played 33 minutes. He doesn't start, but he closed the game over Bjelica. 21-5-4, a steal and a block. Available in 26% of Yahoo leagues for no good reason. Go and make sure he is added. While Cauley Stein had 11 and 12 with 3 blocks. Bud Hield's last couple of games were poor, but he bounced back with 21 here and 4 triples. While Bjelica 5 and 9 in 22 minutes. There are better options on a 12-team wire, I believe, than Bjelica. And when Bagley returns, which is still 2 weeks away, then his value disappears pretty significantly. We also got a weird 16 minutes out of Ben McLemore in which he accumulated 5 fouls. I'm not really sure why we had that much Ben McLemore in the game. For the Lakers, this is the Brandon Ingram that people who salivate over. 21, 7 and 9, a steal, 2 blocks on 69% shooting.
Giggity!
Now, like Justice Winslow, he's never going to shoot at that level. He had struggled even these games with LeBron and Rondo out. He claims he changed his mindset and was looking to get others involved more, and that's fine. But again, we're 2.5 seasons into his career, and he just shows 1 or 2 of these games. Maybe he just doesn't show it consistently enough. If anyone believes that this is a turning point and wants to give you top 50 value back, then you do it immediately. they won't. But just in case, I'm not fully convinced this is going to be the case. We also had big games from Kentavious Caldwell-Pope and the hitman Josh Hart, 26 and 22 points respectively. Both of those guys taking that extra value because LeBron James was out. 22 and 7 for Hart with 2 steals, while Caldwell-Pope had 26 with 2 steals as well. If I'm taking one of those guys, it's Hart over KCP, but it's really just short term while LeBron is out. The future MVP had 18, 9, and 6. Kyle Kuzma, while Lonzo struggled with his shot, missed all 4 of his free throws, but 13, 2, and 6 is it's not a horrendous night from Lonzo Ball there. All right, let's do some DFS now by looking back at the perfect lineups from Sunday on DraftKings. Brandon Ingram, CJ McCollum, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Pascal Siakam, Karl-Anthony Towns, Josh Hart, Lauri Markkanen, and DeAndre Jordan for a total of 379.25 points there. And that cost $49,100. And then on FanDuel, Tyus Jones, De'Aaron Fox, McCollum, Hart, Paul George, Brandon Ingram, Kelly Olynyk, the Chief Al-Farouq Aminu, and Karl-Anthony Towns for a total of $413.9. And that cost the full $60,000 dues. Let's talk some DFS now. For New Year's Eve, we've got 7 games. We're going to be focusing on them from a FanDuel point of view today. The DraftKings main slate does not include the first 2 games. There is early games on. FanDuel is including those games, but DraftKings is not, so be aware of that when looking at your main slate. The first game we look at, the Atlanta Hawks traveling to take on the Indiana Pacers. The Pacers are considerable favourites, 11.5-point favourites. The total is 221. Taurean Prince is out. Kent Bazemore is out, so there's a huge hole there on the wing. You're going to have guys like Jeremy Lin, Kevin Huerter, Kent Bazemore, DeAndre Bembry jumping in to fill that gap there. So some big opportunities. Also, The Undertaker, Dwayne Dedman is doubtful also. So I'd expect more Alex Len, Vince Carter, and perhaps either the Wizard Amari Spellman or Alex Poitras could step up there as well. At point guard, Lin is at 4,100. He's already averaging 22 over the last 3. And with an additional opportunity to play alongside Trae Young here with Bazemore out, I really, really like him at 4,100. He's going to be very chalky, but that's still a strong option. While Darren Collison, 5,300 for Dazza, he's averaging 32 points over the last 3 games. Probably a little bit higher than what you'd anticipate for him, but given the ease of this matchup for Colo, I do think at 5,300 he is worth a look with a bit of tournament upside. I'm not convinced totally on his floor. At shooting guard, Oladipo's at 9,000. The blowout is the risk here, but the matchup is fantastic for Vic. His shot hasn't quite been there of late, and 9,000 is a lot. I'd only consider him for tournaments. On the Hawks side of things, you got Huerter at 4,600. This is a big opportunity for him to bump his usage up. He has been a little bit underwhelming of late, but I'm happy to go back to him in this one, just given that extra opportunity that should be afforded towards him. DeAndre Bembry, another one of the better plays on the board, 4,100 for Bembry, who I imagine will step into the starting lineup and next to Huerter. He had 31 points in 29 minutes last game, a game that Bazemore did leave halfway through. So that's a huge opportunity for him. So I do like him quite a bit. Vince Carter at 38, he had his own big game across the weekend, 28 points in that one. Another opportunity for him with Dedman, unlikely to play. More of a tournament guy for Vince. Tyreek and Bojan Bogdanovic for the Pacers, both small forward guys, not all that keen on them. The Baptist John Collins is at $8,000. I think that's probably a little bit too high for Collins. He's averaging 34 over the last 3. He's had some foul trouble issues. He's not quite getting to that level. His floor is pretty good. I'm just not sure 40 points is a decent ceiling that you're looking at. While Domantas Sabonis and Miles Turner, I'll add Turner in here just because they're both playing center, even though Sabonis is listed as a power forward. 7,000 for Domantas, 76 for Turner. A great matchup. Centers have had big games against the Hawks and power forwards pretty much all season. These guys both dropped 37 in the last game. No reason they can't both achieve value in the same game as well. While Thad Young's at 64. I'd probably end up leaving Young alone. At center, I talked about Turner already. Alex Len at 4,500. He didn't quite get to value last game with Dedman out, but there is an opportunity for him again here. More tournaments than anything else, as the Pacers are one of those teams that opposition centers find it quite tough to go up against. We've seen that pretty much all season. Let's go to the next game, not looking at DraftKings for that one. The Magic and the Hornets. The Hornets are favored by 7.5 points. The total is 210. The Magic on a back-to-back here after that game on Sunday against the Pistons. A good victory for them. A good opportunity here for Vucevic. Some opposition centers have had big games against the Hornets lately. This is a good situation, but for the Magic, there's a real big concern here in that both DJ Augustin and John Simmons are dealing with ankle injuries. If they're both out, then a ton of value opens up for Jaren Grant and, dare I say it, Isaiah Briscoe. Probably not, but a big opportunity maybe for Evan Fournier as well. Now, Augustin's been really driving this team over the last couple of games, so some real huge chances there for some other players if both of those guys don't go. As for DJ, he's at 5,000. He's been smashing that number. He's averaging 39 over his last 3. He had 45 today. I'd be a little bit cautious just given the ankle injury, but at that price, it's still cheap. They haven't adjusted him upwards after today's game, obviously, so I think that he is absolutely in play at that $5,000 price point, assuming he's ready to go. Kemba Walker up at 10,300 on FanDuel. That is very, very high for Kemba. He was slumping, yes, and he's back in business at the moment. It's still a lot to pay for a guy who I do think is fine as a 42, 43 point guy, but as a 52, 53, I don't think that's it for me. So there's other ways I'd rather go there. Well, Tony Parker should return for Charlotte after resting last game, and Devontae Graham stepped into his place and played pretty well. Jeremy Lamb's at 6,400. He's looking for a bounce back. He was poor last game, but prior to that, he'd been putting up strong games, and it is a good matchup. While Fournier at 62, I'd really like Fournier if Augustin happens to sit out. Otherwise, I'm lukewarm. While Terry Ross at 53, I think he also becomes a strong option if both Simmons and DJ happen to be sidelined. For the small forwards, Kid Gilchrist, Batum at 4,900. Well, he beat his value last game. Barely. I'm not super interested in Batum here, though. He's just underwhelming. While Johnny Isaac at 5,000, that just feels too high for John. He had 9 points on Sunday against the Pistons. He's up and down. He would only be for tournaments if you're considering it. Now, if DJ Augustin doesn't play and John Simmons does play, I am interested in Simmons. He's been playing that backup point guard role. He's a minimum salary player, so that should get your interest peaked. But if DJ plays, I'm not sure you can really look at him too closely. At power forward, Marvin Williams is getting a lot of numbers, a lot of minutes. 36 minutes last game for 35 points. He's at 5,900. I think that's a decent value play for Marv, especially for cash. While Aaron Gordon, who'd been struggling prior to the game against Detroit, where he had 41 points, he's at 7,500. That is a $500 price rise for Gordon. Not even since Sunday's game. I'm okay with it. I don't think it's a great play. He has been relatively inconsistent this season. At center, Hernan Gomez and Zala, I don't really care for either of those guys, but I do care for Nick Vucevic at $10,000. The Hornets have been giving up some decently big numbers recently to opposition centers, and we know Vuce has been a strong option on a limited slate. 10,000 is okay. It is going to be hard for him to get to 50 points. It's not an easy thing to do, although he is averaging 55 over his last 3, so obviously he's been quite strong and quite good this season. But trying to I wouldn't say he's an absolute lock or anything along those lines, but he is a relatively strong option in this matchup. The next game we look at, the Boston Celtics taking on the San Antonio Spurs. We've got the Spurs favored by 1. The total is 218 points here. Derek White's been on a bit of a roll. We've also got Rudy Gay, who is questionable for the Spurs now with a wrist issue. At point guard, Bryn Forbes and Derek White are both listed as point guard, and they're going to play together. They're both going to have value. White's actually averaging 28 points over his last 5 at 4,900 on the back of defensive numbers. It is a tough matchup against the Celtics. Their defense is quite good, but I like what White's been doing, so I'm okay with him. While Forbesy's just been going about at 4,400, getting you 24, 25, 26 points, which at 4,400 is not a bad return on FanDuel. So I think he's in play there. Kyrie's at 9,400. Just doing what he does. He's been pretty rock solid. I'm happy to use Kyrie in cash and tournaments as well. Rozier and Mills, no such luck. At shooting guard, there's not a lot to see on the Boston side. Marcus Smart's not really doing it for me. Jaylen Brown the same. And then you got DeMar DeRozan at $9,000. He has actually been living up to that price tag. It is quite steep. I would probably end up fading DeRozan to spend my money in other positions for Monday's game, but he's not a terrible option there. At small forward, Gaze at 5,900 hasn't been living up to that, and now he's injured and a terrible matchup. That's a strong fade. While Gordo Hayward's at 5,500, and he has also been really nowhere near that. If Gay is out, I'd imagine Dante Cunningham would get some extra minutes, as well as Davis Bertans, but they're not really super interesting GPP or any sort of DFS options. The power forwards, LaMarcus Aldridge at $8,000 looks like it's a great option to me. Now, the Celtics do restrict power forwards / centers, and he plays majority of his minutes at centers quite a bit. But he's putting up strong numbers at the moment. I've got no problem with going for Aldridge at what looks like a bargain price of $8,000, while Jason Tatum at $6,700. I think that's probably a little bit too high for Tatum. He's maybe a $6,000 guy, a $6,100 guy. It's okay there, but is the upside actually present in Jace? I'm not sure it is. While Marcus Morris at $6,000, again, very similar to Tatum, maybe $200 to $300 too highly priced. I'm not sure the upside is there for Morris. How much better can he actually play than what he currently is? And the way he's actually playing is not quite bringing the value in that you need for that sort of money. And then at center, Al Horford, the only one we really want to care about here, $6,100 for Horf. He's still returning from that knee injury. They're taking it easy with him, so I think that he is a pretty comfortable guy to fade. Let's go on to look at the DraftKings situation for that game. I like Forbesy, I like White. Gordon Hayward comes in at $4,700 on DraftKings for this game, so I think that makes him an option, especially for tournaments. Jason Tatum, a much more palatable price at $6,000 there as well. I love Aldridge at $75. I love DeRozan at $82 and Kyrie at $89. They all come in looking pretty strong over on DraftKings. Next game up, we've got the Memphis Grizzlies and the Houston Rockets. Eric Gordon is out for Houston, and Austin Rivers will be starting. We know that Gordon was poor when Paul and Harden played. We know that Rivers was poor when Gordon and Harden played. So if now Gordon as third man up, does he slide into the Chris Paul / Eric Gordon role? Probably, and that's going to make him a really valuable guy. We're also waiting to see the status of James Ennis, who's missed the last couple of weeks with a hamstring injury, and that'll put a cramp on Daniel House's numbers, which have been quite solid lately. At point guard here, we've got Mike Conley at $8,700. That's a really high price for Conley. He's been putting up some good numbers, but the Rockets have been very, very good at restricting opposition point guard output. And of course, Conley is a point guard. So I'm not sure that he is the greatest option here. And the other point guards listed are Brandon Knight and Shelvin Mack, and you should fade them. Austin Rivers is at $3,800. Happy to go with Rivers there. He had 26 last game. I think he's going to be a pretty chalky play, but I do like him considerably. While Harden at $12,600. He just gets you 60 every night, and that's as good of a GPP and as good of a cash option as you can get. Really hard to go past that. Dylan Brooks broke out a little bit last game, had 19 points in 25 minutes. He's at just $100 over minimum at $3,600, so he'd be a tournament sort of a guy. Garrett Temple doesn't do it for me. The small forwards, Gerald Green, Kyle Anderson at $6,000. I like Kyle, but I think that's probably a little bit too highly priced for him. I don't really see the upside there. Well, Daniel House at $4,200. He is an interesting GPP guy if Ennis sits. Now, if Ennis plays, I'd probably end up fading House there. At power forward, Triple J, Jaren Jackson Jr., $6,100. It's too expensive. Bickerstaff refuses to play him minutes. There was a great thread on Twitter. I wish I could remember the beat reporter who was writing it about how he just refuses to give him 30 minutes because he's got to give the veterans minutes in JaMychal Green no matter how much better Jackson is. So that's a concern. It would just be a tournament play, but that's about it. Not interested in Green here either. And then at center, Capella versus Gasol, $8,700 versus $8,600. So both of them are highly priced. They're both reasonably priced, but it doesn't make them awesome options. If I'm taking one for $100 extra, I'm going to take Capella in this situation. He's more likely to me to get a 40-pointer than what Gasol is, but neither of them are must-roster lock type of a guy, or lock type of guys, if I'm going to use English correctly. On DraftKings, Harden and Kyle Anderson, Kyle Anderson at 48 on DraftKings is a much, much better proposition. You could also look at JaMychal Green at 37. I don't think that's a terrible option on DraftKings, especially how low that price is. And on DraftKings, you've got Capella and Gasol at 74 and 7,200. I might actually lean Gasol with the DraftKings scoring system and that price differential on DraftKings. That's why it's important to know the site that you're playing on. Jaren Jackson at 53 is absolutely in play to me on DraftKings, much more so than he is over on FanDuel. Austin Rivers at 4,900. He's seen a significant salary boost on DraftKings, so his value is much more limited than what it is on FanDuel. Next up, we've got the Dallas Mavericks and the Oklahoma City Thunder. Weirdly, both of these teams played on Sunday, and weirdly, both of these teams played each other on Sunday. So a rematch the next day. Really, really strange stuff there. We had Terrence Ferguson and Alex Abrines both missing with a stomach issue for the Thunder. We had Wes Matthews miss with that foot issue for the Mavericks, while it's unlikely that Dirk Nowitzki plays, given that it is a back-to-back. So a few situations to monitor. With the Thunder, with Abrines and Ferguson, if those guys are out, Dennis Schroeder gets the bump. Abdul Nadir started today's game, so he could be an option, but really just for weird sort of GPP lineups. And then maybe MC Hamidou Diallo, but he barely played in today's game, so I wouldn't think that too much would happen there. If which guy am I looking for? If Matthews is out, Maxi Kleber got the start. I imagine the same thing will happen again, and he becomes a GPP player. Let's look on FanDuel for this game. At point guard, Russell Westbrook, he just cannot shoot at all. He's at 11,700, but he does very well against Dallas. He puts up the other numbers, and I think today's game, a little bit anomalous in some of the lack of scoring for Westbrook. I look for a bounce back for him, while Dennis Smith Jr. at 52, he's looked pretty strong coming back from that wrist issue. I like him, especially because of how that salary looks. JJ Barea at 4,600. Yeah, maybe, but not really super into that. Schroeder at 58, I really like, especially if one of Ferguson or Abrines is out. If both of them are out, then he becomes really locked in as a cash guy. While Wes Matthews at 4,900, good matchup. He's inconsistent. He'd just be for tournaments, I believe. Luka Doncic at 8,500, just racking up the numbers pretty much every game. Hard to go past him. He had another 20-plus points in Sunday's game. You really do like Doncic here. The price is high, no doubt about that, but he's not a terrible option. Small forward, the pencil, Harrison Barnes, 5,800. I like it. Paul George at 10,300. This guy's just putting up numbers consistently. Both of those guys have cash and tournament value, while at power forward, Jeremy Grant struggled on Sunday. But at 5,800, he'd been putting up strong games before that. I look for him to bounce back, but more for tournament perspective. While Kleber and Powell, I mentioned Kleber already, he is just a GPP guy. Steve Adams and DeAndre Jordan. Jordan's at 72 and Adams is at 68. Jordan actually had 2 blocks in Sunday's game, which is a rarity for him these days. At 7,200, he's giving you around 35 a night, so he is okay, while Adams at 6,800, a little bit quieter in Sunday's game, but I think a bounce back is a possibility here for Steve. So he is a decent cash play. I'd probably have him over Jordan, to be honest. Over on DraftKings, similar Schroeder, Westbrook, George, Barnes. I like all of those guys. I like DeAndre a hell of a lot better than Adams over on DraftKings. 6,100 for DeAndre versus 7,000 for Steve, and 8,100 for Doncic is okay, but there are better DraftKings options around than Big Luka. Onto the next game, the Minnesota Timberwolves and the New Orleans Pelicans. No spread or total yet for this game. Alfred Payton is listed as probable, so he should be making his return. It was a finger injury, so he should be okay in terms of fitness and minutes limits and all that sort of stuff. Nick Mirotic is out. For the Timberwolves, we don't know if Jeff Teague or Derrick Rose are going to play. Both of those guys missed Sunday's game. Of course, the Timberwolves are on a back-to-back, so there could be another big opportunity opening up for Tyus Jones, who filled in fantastically in Sunday's game. At point guard in this one, well, Peyton at 6,200 is probably a little bit high for his first game back, so I would fade that. As for Rose, Teague, Jones, it's all going to depend on which one of those guys plays and what combination of guys. Of course, if Teague and Rose are both out, then Tyus Jones at 4,500 is a lock cash guy. If Teague is out, then you look at Rose. If Rose is out, then you look at Teague. It's all going to be dependent on how those guys, those injuries shake out. At shooting guard, Wiggos at 6,300. I still like him given how positive this matchup is, but he has been really, really bad. And Drew Holiday's at 9,300. His lowest score in his last 5 games, Drew, is an astonishing 42.4. That is a fantastic floor, so that makes him a great cash play in my opinion. Small forward, you got Eton Moore at 47. Big game from him across the weekend, 33 points. Not interested in that, though. He's just too inconsistent, while Bob Covington's at 65. He's been getting things back on board with some nice defensive performances. I do like him in this positive matchup. For the power forwards, Davis at 12.7. Love what Davis has been doing. A little bit quiet across the weekend. Only 48 points, but he should be getting back to the 60s, while Šarić and Gibson, very, very hard to rely upon those guys. We saw Dario's minutes drop way down on Sunday, which was quite confusing, just the 19 minutes there. At center, it's Randall at 8,300. He's been putting up numbers, and with Mirotic out, he's okay. I think that's probably a little bit too high, though. And then you got Towns at 9,800, who dropped just a casual 90 points on the weekend. I liked him before that 90-pointer, and I like him even more now after we saw that big game. On DraftKings, I like Peyton because he comes in at 5,400. Davis, Holiday, Towns. Randall at 79 also looks pretty strong over on DraftKings. Next up, we look at the Golden State Warriors and the Phoenix Suns. The Warriors are favored by 11 points. The total is 227 here in this one. It is a good opportunity for DeAndre Ayton because centers have been putting up some pretty good numbers against the Warriors, and he is on a bit of a hot streak at the moment. At point guard, actually, we'll quickly touch on Devin Booker is questionable with a back issue. If he is out, then you're looking at a little bit of Troy Daniels, but way more value for Josh Jackson, Kelly Oubre, and DeAnthony Melton, who should play more minutes now and push up towards close towards 30. At point guard, Melton's at 41. He played 30 minutes last game, had 24 points, but I'd only be utilizing him if Booker is out, while Curry's at 10-1. The blowout risk is real here, but he's always a GPP sort of a guy in this scenario. At shooting guard, Booker's at 9,000. I'd happily use him if he's playing, but we don't know that yet at this point. While Klay Thompson got back on track, 7,100 he had 41 across the weekend. I'm still not ready to fully rely upon Klay. Kelly Oubre's at 42, averaging under 20 points over the last 3, barely over 20 over his last 5. So in other words, he's not playing well. But if Booker is out, then I think at 4,200, Oubre would become an option. Tony Warren Jr. is at 7,000. If Booker's out, I love him at that price. And McCall Bridges at 4,700. He's doing it with defense, but maybe a few more shot attempts come his way. If Booker is sidelined at 4,700, that could come into play as well. For the power forwards, Joshy Jackson at 4,200, the power forward who will likely start at shooting guard when Booker is out. That makes him a good option in that scenario. Urepko, Draymond, I don't really like either of those guys. And then the centers, Ayton's at 8,000. He had 63 last game. The Warriors, we've saw them give up back-to-back big games against Yusuf Nurkic. Ayton can come in and put up numbers. I like him. Well, on the other side, centers against the Suns also do well. So Kevon Looney at 4,200. He's had a lower score in his last 5 of 20, which is a great floor. He could be a 27 or 28 point guy here. So a lower priced option if you're looking for one of those centers. On DraftKings, Looney's even cheaper, 3,700. I like Ayton, I like Curry. Melton, Jackson, and Booker, they're all tournamenty type of guys, all dependent on Booker's injury. Kevin Durant, probably a little bit too highly priced given the blowout potential here. Oubre and Bridges would come into consideration if Booker is ruled out. Let's look at some studs and values now. On DraftKings, it's Tone Davis as my stud, and my value is Kevon Looney. On FanDuel, my stud is DeAndre Ayton, and my value is DeAndre Bembry. A lot of DeAndres there. On Yahoo, my stud is Anthony Davis, and my value play is DeAndre Bembry at minimum salary. And then on DraftStars, my stud is karl-Anthony Towns, and my value play is Lord Alfred Payton. Guys, that'll do it for this podcast, the last podcast of 2018. I want to thank everybody for supporting this podcast all through the year, and I hope you guys have a fantastic and safe, happy new year. A reminder, no show tomorrow, so we'll be back on New Year's Day for those of you in the States, and it'll be the 2nd of January here for those of you in Australia. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya. Devin Booker.